Today, our guest is Barbara York, a composer who is Canadian born, but now lives in Kansas. And she's had an illustrious career. And I've already talked to her that kind of what we do is we talk, first of all, sort of about our journey in music, where we started, how we got to where we are, all the zigs and the zags and the disappointments and the ups and downs and the successes and the failures. And then we'll move into her music, and Patrick O'Donnell is going to participate because Barbara wrote the concerto that Patrick played to be the brass winner of the Wind Ensemble Concerto Competition, which we're supposed to play this in about a month here. And we won't this year, but we will next season, hopefully. So Barbara, take it away. Tell us about you and how you got into music and how you chose music, or if music chose you. Or
Definitely music chose me. I don't think there's any question about that. Well, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we moved to Montreal when I was about 2 or 3. I don't really remember. And so I grew up in Montreal. And I was the youngest of 3 girls. My 2 older sisters were taking piano lessons, and my mother had taken piano lessons when she was little. She wasn't particularly musically inclined, but it had just been part of her upbringing. But she was smart enough to realize that it would be a really good idea if I learned to read music, because I was going to the piano at like 4.5 and picking out little tunes by ear. And she thought that maybe that was not such a great idea. The piano teacher came to our house. So when I was about 4.5, he would take 5 minutes off the end of one sister's lesson and 5 minutes off the beginning of the other sister's lesson and start teaching me. So by the time I was 5, I was having my own lesson and reading music and totally getting into it. My sisters have always loved music, but I was the only one that went into music. They sang in choirs and really enjoyed it, but I don't think there was ever any question in my mind that I was going to be a musician. It was just a question of, as I got older, figuring out what that really meant and what the options were. When I was little, very little, like 5, 6, I thought I wanted to be a music teacher because that's the only musicians that I had any personal contact with. And I started writing music, little tunes, when I was about 7. So my piano teacher thought that this was a good opportunity to do some theory and teach me how to write down what I was writing. He was very smart, he was good. He realized that I probably wasn't going to become a concert pianist, so he let me go fast through things. I was a good sight reader, and I didn't particularly want to be taking, I don't know, 2, 3 months on one piece and memorizing it. And so we just went through a lot of repertoire, and I learned to play very well, like well enough that when I finally did go into music education, I already qualified for what I needed to get out of piano as a first instrument in music education. So I was able to skip that, and I took voice lessons instead, which was, very, very useful. So I had a really wide base. But as a composer, I went to university in Montreal, to McGill University, in 1965. And at that point, in the latter part of the 20th century, there was a time period in which tonal music went very much out of fashion. If you didn't write atonal music, 12-tone, serial, you were not considered to be worth listening to. So I wound up taking a composition class for about 3 weeks and left it because they just weren't doing the kind of thing I wanted to do. And during my summers, I also worked as a rehearsal pianist for a summer theater. So what happened is, when I got out of university, I decided I didn't want to teach school, that I wanted to go into the theater. And I loved it. It was fun. I was good at it. I became a music director, traveled all across the country, wound up at the National Arts Center as an associate music director there. But the other thing with the theater is that I was allowed to write tonal music. In fact, they wanted me to write tonal music. So I would write incidental music. I wrote a couple of musicals, one of which won Toronto's version of a Tony. And it was great. But in Canada, you really can't make a living in the theater unless you're prepared to travel. So I finally got married and wanted to have children. And in order to stay home and have children, I basically left the theater and I went back into classical accompanying. And this was fine too, because I was kind of getting bored in the theater. When you're in the theater, you play you're sitting there for theater rehearsals and you play the same, I don't know, 24 measures, like 5 or 6 times over, maybe 8 times over. And then they go back to the beginning of the scene and they start it all again. And sometimes you'll get through the whole thing and sometimes you won't. And I got to the point where I was getting a little bored, you know. So the classical accompanying was great because I was a fast learner and a fast reader, and I could absorb all sorts of repertoire. Like literally over the next 40 years of accompanying classical music, I probably played thousands and thousands of pieces for various instruments. And it was like a great, great education for me because there were all these different styles and all these different instruments. And I learned the sound of these instruments in my head. I learned what these instrumentalists had trouble doing and what was more comfortable for them. And it was like taking, for me, it was like taking an orchestration course every time I played with somebody. It was great. And of course they didn't realize that I was doing that, but that was fine. I didn't mind that because I was just absorbing so much. And I loved to watch other people teach too. And I got to sit in people's lessons while their teachers were teaching them. And it was just, it was such a broad education. You know, I loved it. That was the one thing I had enjoyed about the theater was like, I could watch how other people directed. It was like for me, I got to have years and years of being in master classes every day. And then years and years of being in orchestration class every day. And it was just a tremendous opportunity. Well, eventually, after a little while, eventually, my type of music, the type of music that I write, which I guess is kind of post-romantic, finally came back into fashion. And I didn't have a publisher at that point because mostly when you're writing theater music in Canada, you don't publish the music. But by then I was in the United States. And a very good tuba player from Boise State, he's not there anymore, came to Kansas. And I was asked to accompany him for a guest recital. And I had never played for tuba before. In fact, if you had suggested to me when I was little that I would wind up writing for tuba, I would have thought that I was going to go oompa oompa. I mean, I really had no concept of what this instrument could really do. And he was playing Brahms songs on the tuba, and some of the really fast ones too. And I was just fascinated. I said, you know, I write music. I'd like to write something for you. And he said, could I have it in 2 months? He was having some sort of workshop for high school students come in. He said, I'd like to premiere it in 2 months. I said, okay. And he eventually wound up premiering 4 of my pieces. The first 4 pieces that I wrote for tuba were all commissioned by him. And then I got an award for a piece that I had written for euphonium and saxophone that I had written for somebody who had gone out and been a guest of his. So I'd met Adam Fry that way. I said, I'd like to write something for you. So eventually I got a publisher. And it was because I had won this Harvey Phillips Award that I got a publisher. Well, I've never played a brass instrument ever. I've never taken a brass methods class. I have taken woodwind methods. I can barely go, and that's about it. Yeah, I really, but within a few years of publishing music for low brass, it was like I was the tuba queen. You ask me why I write for tuba? Because they keep asking me. They ask me, and then the euphonium players asked me. And I mean, I have written for other things too. I've written for several woodwinds, but the people that just seem to want my stuff all the time are the brass players. And I think part of it is because I don't box them in. I tend to write for a brass player as though that person were a singer with a larger range many times, and I let them be romantic and emotional. Now that's very much back in fashion now, but when I started writing for brass at the beginning of the 2000s, it wasn't. They were still very boxed into da 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 da, you know, outlining chords, and it was they didn't have these lyrical lines. And I think that when I started writing that for them, probably out of ignorance, they loved it and they wanted more. And that's when my tuba career took off. People are playing my stuff all over the world now. I have a lot of people in Taiwan and Japan who play my music. I've been commissioned by the principal tuba of the Osaka Symphony. They've used some of my pieces, and I'm saying tuba meaning euphonium as well. They've used at least one of my pieces at one of the major competitions in Europe. And I've been on the competition lists here, almost every year on some competition list, because my stuff is just that much different from everybody else's that I think it fills a void for people and for teachers who want to be able to give a really well-rounded education to their students. I don't think that you can probably go through a music degree in low brass anymore in this country without playing at least one of my pieces, and often more than one, because it's just that much different from the rest of the repertoire that people find it useful. So I'm glad they do. I'm glad they find it useful. And I do write, like I said, I do write for other things, and I'm writing more for ensembles than I used to. It took a while to write for ensembles because ensembles are very expensive to have. But, you know, but now I'm doing more of that too. I'm trying to think if there's anything I've left out in my wonderful, exciting life. Yeah, the fact that I've had to do other jobs a couple of times, and I couldn't wait to get back to doing music. It was just, I got depressed. It was just grueling eventually, the longer it went on. And, you know, I could do it well because I'm a fairly smart individual and I can learn how to do a job. But it was just, it was painful. And I've never made a whole lot of money as a musician, but there's never been anything else that I really wanted to do. So I learned how to live with a little bit less, and it changed my priorities. I learned the difference between what I wanted and what I actually needed. And I think that maybe America's going through that right now too. I think that this economic struggle is changing people's priorities between what really is life and death,
Right.
and what really is important, and what is just window dressing.
Right.
No, I actually wound up at one point after I got divorced from my first husband, I wound up sleeping in my car for 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I, you know, I've known a couple of other good, very good musicians who have had similar experiences of just a crash at one point. And I was really embarrassed by that and ashamed of it for a while. And now I think it was one of the most interesting things that could ever have happened to me. You know, I was in my 40s and it changed so much about, I dropped all sorts of frivolity or whatever. It just totally made the difference. I went to work for a traveling carnival selling tickets. And that's how I got back. I worked my way back. And I finally got, I finally got an apartment, and I got a job, and eventually went back into music. But it changed my perspective on a lot of things, I think.
And it therefore makes this whole thing that's happening to us right now easier, right? I mean, in a certain level.
For me, it is, yes. Yeah. And it makes it easier for me to try to help people laugh a little bit, or to try to calm down a little bit, or whatever, because I've seen lots of bad stuff. And it doesn't frighten me like it used to, the bad stuff. I was very, very ill last fall also. I got a pneumonia on top of this pulmonary fibrosis that I have, and it was very bad. It was almost as bad as the COVID is, which leads me to question whether or not I might even have had it, but I don't think so. And my main concern was, how's my husband going to manage? It's like it wasn't all. I'm not terrified of the idea of losing things. I'm not terrified of the idea of dying. I'm more concerned about what other people might do if I wasn't there to give them a hand. And right. I think that's always helpful when these really terrible situations arise. Right. Sometimes it's the fact that we're needed that keeps us going more than our desire for something.
Right. You said so much here that's so beautiful and so useful, particularly the notion of we don't need what we think we need.
No, we don't.
And these kind of circumstances really make that crystal clear. And
yes.
It's so important to just emotional stability in that kind of crises when you begin to sort of pare things away. And that's really true. It's interesting. For you guys who are listening, I don't know Barbara that well. We've talked on the phone once, but it's amazing. We have a lot in common. I was a pianist too, and I really resonated with what you said about going to everyone's lessons. I accompanied the Concertmistress of the Orchestra and some other really good players, really good trombone players.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that. That's great.
Yeah, and obviously, since I was a tuba player, this is amazing. I mean, what a great connection. And thank you for writing for the King of Instruments. I totally appreciate that. And I know Patrick does too.
It's a wonderful instrument, really.
Yeah.
And has been very much underrated, but it's a great instrument. Right. And the tuba players are so great.
Yeah.
We all have these ideas about certain, how the older players are supposed to be like a little uptight because of back pressure. It's all these memes that we have. But the tuba players really are the most laid back, right. And the nicest and the funniest.
Yeah, they're funny.
They're funny, and they're and I think it's because they've been ignored for so long.
Right. That
they don't take themselves so seriously.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's pretty cool that your music's being played in Japan, and I've been in Japan a lot. And for the students' sake, in Japan, there are so many good euphonium players, so many. They're under every rock in the country. There's thousands of them. And so for her music to be picked up by that crowd, I mean, Japan is kind of euphonium central, and tuba for that matter too, but especially.
Yeah. Well, Osaka sends an ensemble to the ITEC usually, almost every time. And they're always the best one there. Right. I mean, they're so good. Right. And they're just flawless and so disciplined, but not heartless. It's not like they're machines.
No.
They just play so darn well.
No.
I don't know how they do that, really. Honestly, I don't know how they can manage to teach their kids at such a young age how to play so well and yet still not be like some sort of robot. They're not at all. It's just beautiful stuff.
Right. Yeah. When I was first going to Japan, band directors would say that to me, and I began to see that it was sort of I hate to use this word, but it's kind of a form of racism, where white boy band directors like me over here would say, well, they play like little robots. That isn't true.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No.
Never my experience.
Yeah.
incredible passion and heart and all the rest of it. They're just people like we are.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So Patrick, are you there?
Oh,
Patrick, come out wherever you are.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good.
hi.
Hello.
Hi,
So
Patrick.
thought it'd be great if you guys could chat for a minute. I know he has some things he wants to talk to you about.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we just
So,
barely got
I just have
started. Oh my
couple
gosh.
of things. So you already answered, because I was going to ask about what it was really about Tuba Youth that kind of drew your attention.
It was
And,
an accident. Yeah.
Yeah, it usually is. But so I just wanted to know, like, for people who are interested in getting into composing, would you encourage people to start like to look into writing for music for instruments that don't necessarily have quite the repertoire selection of like violin, oboe, trumpet?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Because not only do they need it, but then you also learn your orchestration and you learn about those instruments. Absolutely. But you know, the big thing about if you want to be a composer, you know, it's like everybody's got a novel in them, but they don't write, right? Or they say they have it. I'd like to be a writer. I'd like to be a novelist, but they don't actually write anything. And I've heard of lots of people who want to be a composer, but they don't actually write anything. So, I mean, good for you if you want to be a composer, but how are you going to be a composer if you don't? So write for anything. Write for anybody that will play your stuff and learn from them what the strengths and the weaknesses of their instrument are. You know, learn what the limitations of that instrument are, or what you've left out that they would like you to put in, you know, and get it in your ear. If you write orchestration wise, according to just what a chart is, and honestly, I haven't got memorized all the ranges of all the instruments. I just look them up. You know, it doesn't bother me at all. I look stuff up. Albert Einstein once said that he never memorizes anything he can look up. So I figure if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me too. Because I don't either. I don't keep those things in my head. I'm not taking an exam on it. And if I can't remember how many octaves the marimba does, I'll just look it up.
Right.
But to get it in your ear is something else. And to have played with instruments and hear the difference when they switch registers, or the difference when if like for instance the tuba is down too low all the time with the piano, how it gets muddy and you don't hear it coming through the line. Right. You know, so a lot of people will make the mistake of writing too long, too low for the tuba, and what happens is it gets lost. It's like writing for trombones too low. You put 3 trombones down too low and all you're hearing is you're not really hearing a chord, right? There's no clarity, right? So writing for instruments you don't know is just great, you know? I wrote at the request of a bassoon teacher, I wrote a contrabassoon sonata. And I knew zilch about contrabassoon. I knew about bassoon because my daughter had played bassoon in college. And I had written a sonata for her, but I knew nothing about contra. And it was cool because this person demonstrated for me, and then I wrote this piece. And I always, when I write my pieces, I'm always trying to be sort of personal for the person I'm writing for. So I learn a lot of other things too. But it was, I wrote something for Double Bell Euphonium last fall, and I knew nothing about Double Bell Euphonium. And my friend Gail Robertson, I went and visited her, and she played it for me and demonstrated. I went, oh, that's really cool, you know? Right. So it was, I'm still learning. I'm still writing for stuff that I haven't written for before, you know? But the brass guys, I don't know, they like me, which is nice. It's nice. Yeah. It's really nice. And so the International Women's Brass Conference has been really good for me too, because there's a lot of really great female, you know, brass players that are really good. Oh, you know what we never got into with Tim? We never got into the female issues in the 20th century that were such a struggle, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so at some point, Tim, we'll have to talk about that again too. Because at one point a student asked me, she said, was there anything that was more difficult for you because you were a woman? And I said, growing up in the second half of the 20th century, everything was more difficult for me because I was a woman. So yeah, interesting. I mean, if any of your young ladies would like to talk to me at some point, hey, anybody, by the way, you can friend me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. And if anybody wants to chat with me at some point, I'm glad to do it. And yeah, women, you are so lucky. You don't realize how far we've come, although we still have a long way to go. But
Right.
yeah, it was.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. But just before we do, I want to stick on the process, on your process. So all of the students that you're talking to today have embarked on sort of an online composition process, and they're becoming familiar with Audacity and GarageBand and different things, and they're playing in stems, and they're producing it in teams, and it's kind of a cool thing that woman composer Alex Shapiro has.
Yes, I know her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great, and she's helped us a lot with this and has made multiple visits. So, of course, a lot of our students are doing composition for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And so what kind of advice do you have there to just sort of jumpstart the creative process, you know, whether it's muses or parameters or whatever it is that helps you get going?
I can only tell you for myself, of course, because everybody eventually has to find their own way of doing things. I can tell you for sure that one of the ways that gets me going is that I have a deadline. Because you can just ruminate over something for such a long time. And the fact that I've got to get the damn thing done is amazing, because once you get started, it's easier to fix what you're doing than it is to get started. I think getting started is the hardest thing. But often I will spend quite a bit of time figuring out how to approach a piece, because for me, I always have to have something that I want to say. Either I'm telling a story or I have a point of view on something. For me to just say, oh, just write whatever you want, write a piece, that's way too broad. You know, this universe is enormous, you know, so I need something to latch onto, to hang on to give me some sense of what this is going to be about. And I think that the problem for people starting to write, especially for young composers, is that they want to write their masterpiece right away. And so this huge world is open to them, and they can't narrow it down to writing a piece. And to think in terms of you're writing a body of work. You know, it's not you who's going to decide what's a masterpiece and what isn't a masterpiece. Although you will like some of your pieces better, and you'll feel like some are more successful than others. But the idea in your head that you're going to say everything you have to say in this one piece is really, it's like you might as well take out a stick and beat yourself over the head with it. You know, you can't do that. And all it's going to do is slow you down. I went through a period where I was so self-critical of my own work when I was in my early 20s that I really couldn't write anything. I just got bound up, you know, because I was too self-critical. And you just have to give yourself room to be writing a piece. And what is this piece going to be about? Or what is my point of view on this piece? Or who is this piece for, right? What does that person need to have in a piece? Or what does that person want explored emotionally or philosophically, right? I do a lot of very personal stuff for people. I have people write me emails and tell me all sorts of stuff about themselves, and sometimes they don't have any idea what they want, in which case I can use whatever is around me at the time. Or sometimes, you know, they'll say, I want a memorial piece for this baby that died, which has happened to me, you know, but if I'm thinking always of what I'm trying to say, either for that person or in general, what I'm trying to express, it gets me out of myself, out of paying too much attention to me and being too self-critical and getting myself bound up and not being able to express anything. You know, it's
I really like that. You said a bunch of things that I thought are linked. You talked about a masterpiece and self-critical, which means that, you know, there's perfectionism in most of this in classical music.
yes, yeah,
Because our imagined ideal of whatever it is ridiculously lofty, so much so that we don't even hear it. We can't even see it.
oh yeah,
We just think it's out there.
yes,
And so we grasp and grasp. But I really like also the fact that you're talking here about externalizing that. Stop. You're not staring at your navel. You're saying,
right.
you know, there's somebody out there that's got a story to tell here, and I'm going to reflect that.
Yes,
And it would seem to me that that really takes the pressure off in the jumpstart part of the.
it helps. You know, it's like people who want to lose 40 pounds or want to start exercising. You know, you don't jump to 40 pounds off. You know, you start walking a little bit. You know,
Right.
it's like you can't you just have to put something down. And then you can throw it out. You're allowed. I mean, you're in charge. It's your piece. You can throw it out if you want, or if you like something from that, you can go off on that. But it's very different when it's in your head and when it's on paper. It's like there's a transition that you go through, and it never sounds, when it comes out into the real world, quite exactly like you thought it was when you were envisioning it. It takes on a life of its own, and you have to work with it. You know, it's like if you're making a pot with clay or whatever, you have to actually work with the clay. You don't just envision, you know. And if your clay is from a different place or whatever, it's going to respond differently. So when it comes out into the real world, it's not quite what you expected. But I think really, I think people try to be too smart sometimes, and smart alecky and clever. And it's so much more difficult to just write something honest, you know, to write something simple and honest. You know, one of the most simple things that I did was for this dead baby. And I pared away and pared away and pared away until there was almost nothing left. And it's one of my most successful pieces. And I learned from that how hard it is to write simply, you know, because you can hide behind cleverness. You can hide yourself behind cleverness, and so can the performer. And the performer can go, and that's what happened with a lot of the 12-tone music, because the audiences didn't understand it. They didn't know if it was good or not good. And the performers could play almost anything, and nobody would know if they made a mistake. You know, it was like there was a lot of hiding that went on in that period. Not that some of it wasn't good and honest, because some of it was, but people got away with stuff then that they shouldn't have gotten away with, and they puffed themselves up to be self-aggrandizing because they could make their music sound so clever. And clever isn't necessarily good or real or useful, and it doesn't necessarily touch people unless you're trying to be funny clever, or you know what I mean. You can have humor in it, but the cleverness, if you're using it to hide behind, is not. I don't think it's helpful.
Right, and all of this, you know, when you're recounting this is such a common story for composers of your generation, my generation, who did the 12-tone academic study thing and then just kicked it to the curb.
Yeah, I played a lot of it because I played for saxophone a lot.
Right.
Oh my God, you know, there was so much of it. But yeah, I would never write anything like that now. It does nothing for me. And and I know it does do things for some people, but
Right.
it doesn't come from anywhere in me where I resonate.
Right, and during that time period, it was like so many people were afraid to say the emperor has no clothes. You sort of alluded to that.
That's right.
And just got kind of swept along, afraid to say anything because they might be perceived as being dumb.
Yes, yeah.
And that's sad, because artists and audiences and everybody that comes in contact with art, if you don't have an opinion, you're missing the boat
Yeah.
in a certain way.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, exactly. You know, And I have to judge competitions every so often now. I don't know why they think I can do that, but, and I often will disagree with the performers that are judging that competition. I might be the only composer on a, because they are often swept away by cleverness, I think. And often the person will win because the rest of the committee or whatever will be swept away by that, and I'll just concede. But what I will have written down on my list is very clever, but no point of view. And I will have put that person down much lower than up in the top two, you know, because a lot of times, I guess I see through that differently. And I don't have to play it, so yeah, whatever. But I just think I see things differently.
Right. You're very eminently quotable, I have to say, Barbara.
Oh God, thank you.
No, it's true. And when I listen to you, I think about the things that I want the students to grab onto, and I just love this. Don't be swept away by cleverness. How great is that? That is great.
Yeah, and it's really easy to do that. It's really easy to do that. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin's clapping his hands.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I need to tell you about how that the concerto was written, right?
Yes. Right.
Okay, so I'm married to my second husband now, so I have some stepchildren, and he started having children way too early, like right out of high school. Yeah, I guess he couldn't keep it in his pants. I don't know, but we won't say that. But he has a daughter who had a fairly lengthy military career, and she was sent to Kuwait at the beginning of Desert Storm. So that's where this piece came from, because I was asked to write a tuba concerto, but he didn't specify for me, Mike Fisher didn't specify for me what he wanted. So when that happens, I'll usually write what's on my mind. And that was very much on my mind. And I think it's very relevant still now, perhaps even more so, because the thing that was on my mind, Kevin and I are into metaphysics too, was what it does to people when they have to participate in this activity in war, and how they're not robots and they're not drones, and they come back broken. You know, my dad was in World War II. My husband's brother was in Vietnam, and now our stepdaughter was sent to Kuwait, and she was doing personnel and bringing troops in and out and sending them across the border into Iraq. And this piece is all about some guy, and in my mind, we were living in Kansas City. In my mind, it was a Black man from Kansas City, because a lot of people signed up there because of, they signed up for the military because they didn't have a lot of other opportunities. Okay, so in my mind, this was some kid who had gotten out of high school and signed up for the military because it sounded good, you know, sounded like a good idea. And he was hyped by the recruiters who said, listen, we'll pay for you to go to college, and it'll be wonderful, and it'll be all glorious. And it doesn't turn out like that, you know, through the piece. It doesn't turn out like that at all. He goes across the country and he goes through the training, and then, you know, and then he goes off to war, and he's sitting there and he's missing his family desperately, and his girlfriend, you know, in the second movement. And the third movement, it's all about, there he is in the middle of battle, and he's on the side of a building, and he's looking around, and there's all this like smoke and dead bodies, and everything smells like death and gunpowder, and the alarm bells are going off. You know, it's like, watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it, you're gonna get killed, watch it, down, get down, you know. And then in the middle, there's this blues section, because Kansas City really isn't a jazz town, even though it says it is. It's really a blues town. And it always was, you know. So there's this blues section in the middle, and basically what he's doing in the blues section, pay attention to this, Patrick, so you don't get clever, right? He's going, this isn't what they told me. Not what they told me. Not what they told me. This is not what I expected. They said I was going to be a hero and it was all going to be glorious, and it's awful. It's just awful. And the piece doesn't resolve, because then he's back in the middle of the battle and we don't know if he makes it or not. But we do know that some of the people who made it and came back and still do make it and come back are very broken people. They have PTSD. Many of them commit suicide because they can't handle what it did to them to have to do this. So that's the whole purpose of that piece, Patrick.
No pressure, Patrick.
None at all. None at all.
But just
yeah,
tell the story. Just tell the story,
Yeah.
you know, because it gives you an opportunity to get, if you tell the story, it gives you an opportunity to get away from the comment or the philosophical comment or whatever. Just tell the story. He's just a guy, you know. He's just a guy, and he's stuck in this because he thought it was going to be different than it was.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Patrick, did you have anything else you want to ask her?
With regards to the concerto, no, that covered just about all of it.
Not just about, yeah, swiped you right off there, huh?
Yeah, I was hanging on every word of that. That everything you just said was just so much more in depth than anything that I could have found on like the publishing websites for it or anything like that.
Well,
So
you know, and there, do you have the program notes too that come with it?
I have it pulled up right here.
Okay, you know,
right now.
because I mean, there are some other things in the program notes, like about the fact that I always liked the Russian orchestral music, and so
Right.
you know, there's elements of that in there, but those are secondary to me. Those are technique things,
Right.
as opposed to purpose things, you know. So we've got, you know, we got a little Prokofiev, and we've got some Rachmaninoff in the second movement, and we've got some Shostakovich in the last movement. But those are technical things, you know, like why did you use this word or
Right.
whatever for a writer. It's not what the piece is about in that sense. But I just add those things in sometimes for myself.
Yeah, all of that was just so with just everything you were saying and how much more in depth and everything it goes. It kind of opened my eyes to a new approach, which I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna revisit some things I think now.
Great, that's great.
Having this discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was being cautious with the program notes too, because I didn't exactly want people to just think this is an anti-war piece, because I'm very not anti-military. I mean, you know, our stepdaughter was in the military. I don't want people to think that, if anything, I'm very concerned about them and what they are taking on without realizing what they're taking on, you know. So I was a little cautious about that. I didn't want people to think that it was a highly political piece and therefore they didn't want to play it, or that I was anti-military, and you know, I just didn't want people to misunderstand in that sense. But I think we're a lot closer now, frankly, after 20 years of this, to understanding what this piece really is about, because these poor people coming back, you know, they're really, really struggling. They're really broken. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've lost their humanity when, you know, it's very tragic. I think if anything, what's going on right now in the country is that we are being forced to try to regain our humanity.
Right.
You know, it's just cut out the extraneous.
Right.
Cut out all the other stuff, all the distractions, you know, all the distractions, and just be there.
Right.
You know, and it's very hard for a society that is so full of distractions.
Right.
Our society is built on distractions.
Right.
You know, but it's Swiss cheese underneath.
Right.
You know, there's all these holes in it, and we're being asked to fill in those holes with something substantial. Something real.
So I really, I wanted to just sum up this last little bit to the students again. I feel like I'm sort of like an interpreter kind of. I love.
I'd love to go out for a drink with you sometime and we
Yeah.
just talk all day.
We will do
Where
it.
in Kansas
Yeah.
are you? Sorry.
Yeah.
Where in Kansas are you? I'm in Overland Park right now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Oh, hi. Wow.
You could go have a social. You could go have a social distance drink like outside her house or something, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to take my phone and we'll do a follow-up video. We can have a second chat.
I'm friend me on Facebook, for God's sake.
I already did.
What's your instrument?
Trombone.
He's a professor.
Oh.
He's a visiting professor here at the UW right now.
Oh, that's great.
Also that.
Have you played a caged bird?
Not yet.
Oh,
No.
you got to play that. Yeah, you'll love that.
She's great. She's selling it, man. That's great. But I wanted to say about what she just said to the students. I hope one thing you heard that I heard anyway was that, especially as she's describing the tuba concerto, she's describing something as a composer. She's describing something. She has imaged something in her head, storyline, and sounds like visual images and emotions and stuff, and she's just describing it. And again, I think that sort of helps take the pressure off in a certain way. And for purposes of this thing that we're trying to do with the students, I think it lights up that part of them that we're interested in lighting up, which is the imaginative side
Yes.
of their music making, something that's desperately critical. Well, I want to circle back while we have time, because we want to do, I want to talk to you about your life as a woman in music, because I'm with you. I think that the females in our group here need to know the stories of people that have gone before. Because as you've mentioned, we're better than we used to be in that respect, but we're not home yet.
No, not at all.
And so I think it'd be good to talk about that a little bit. Then what we're going to do is we have the ability on this Zoom program to break into rooms. So the whole group is divided up into composition teams by like instruments. And we'll stick you in with a low brass, and you can chat with them about
cool.
how
Okay.
the composition thing is going.
Yeah.
And during the composition rooms, you guys, when we break into that, check on the progress of your team mix, and also come up with a question for Barbara when we regather. But let's use a few minutes here just to talk about the path you were forging as a woman composer in the world of music.
It was even at home. My mother was born in 1910. And she actually was one of the first few women at her university in Manitoba to get a master's degree. And she was doing that because she was waiting around for my father to finish university. It was during the Depression, and he had to put himself through university. So she did a master's degree. So, but she said that I should do music education because then I would have teaching to fall back on. It's like, I was a girl and I shouldn't count on anything. I mean, I like teaching, but I did not want to teach for a career. I wasn't happy at university because of that, because because it wasn't any fun. It wasn't the stuff that I really wanted to do. Instead, I was conducting the Gilbert and Sullivan Society and writing for the Red and White Review. And I was doing all these other things that I really enjoyed, and I loved singing in the ensemble. I liked all that stuff, but I really didn't. It was interesting to learn about music education. And I think I've used a lot of that when I've written children's pieces, and I have done that. I've written things for children, and it was probably, God bless my mother. She probably was correct because it made me more round as a person. And I'm getting rounder by the minute, and I think everything that you do is useful. I think that's why reading books, I think read books and listen to politics and dance and do all sorts of things, because otherwise you won't have anything to say. You know, you can't turn yourself into someone who has something to say without broadening yourself. So, you know, that's good. But when I went to university, it was really difficult to get taken seriously to do anything except teach. And then when I came out, I immediately was asked to conduct an equity show in Winnipeg, and did it, and did very well at it. And eventually became one of the top, I would say probably one of the top 3 music directors in the country for a good decade. But when I was still quite young, I moved to Toronto with a boyfriend, and I went to see the head of variety at CBC television. CBC is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It's like the BBC, only it's the Canadian version, right? And we did have variety shows then. We're talking about the 70s. They still had shows, and you know, which they had people come and sing and dance and do comedy acts and jugglers. You know, we had all that stuff. So I went and saw this guy because my boyfriend said, you should really go see him. So I went and saw him. And this was still before it was illegal to do this. But he actually said to my face, I would never hire a female conductor because the men in the orchestra would never listen to him. Right to my face. You can think that now, but you can't say it, you know? And we still hear now of females in orchestras who have been sexually assaulted by male conductors, and they think they can get away with that, and they have gotten away with it until very recently. And you know, I went through the whole women's lib thing. I went to university in the 60s, you know? I went through women's lib and all that other stuff, but we're still quite far behind now, because there are still people, including the president, who wants to pat women on the head, you know? And no, we're not the same as men. Somebody said, no, not just somebody, several people would say to me when I was playing piano, God, you're so good, you play just like a man. Okay, and it was meant as a compliment. And I knew it was meant as a compliment, so I took it as a compliment. But what they really meant was that I had certain strength and a certain authoritativeness to the way I played, not that I played like a man, right? What does a man play like? Right? What does a woman compose like? You know, the orchestra conductor here does a fair bit of my music, and he's still educating audiences. His wife did her doctorate in female flute composers. And he keeps saying to the audience, if you don't know who wrote this, you would never be able to tell if it's a man or a woman. And it's true, you know. It's really important to remember that good work doesn't have a gender, right? It really doesn't. And we need to just do good work. And it's really nice that a lot of people are taking the time and trouble to do female composers now. But most of the fairly well-known female composers that I know, including people like Alex Shapiro, and Julie Giroux and a lot of other people, they say, really, I just want my music done because it's good. I really don't want that handout, although it's very nice, because there are times when people wouldn't even have looked for my music because I'm not some European white guy who's dead, you know? And I like to say, you know, I'm not dead and I'm not a guy, you know? But we would like to get to the point where nobody cares. They only want to do your music because they like your music and it's good music, period.
Right, we went through this here in my grad conducting studios, about 6 in there. About 4 years ago, we started having real long conversations about this issue. And that's what we came to, because the studio was more women than men at that time.
Oh, wow, right.
And we talked about it a long time, and we came to that exact conclusion that we were not going to do concerts of all female music.
Good.
That is absolutely antithetical. It's not what we
Yep.
should be about. We should just be deliberate in our programming of women composers without fanfare.
Yes.
Because the music's good, and then that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what
Yep.
we were supposed to be doing for decades. So it's a pretty simple thing, but you do have to be concerted about going out and deliberately find, because in my experience, there's so many new, really good female composers coming out
Yes.
right now because of people like yourself that have blazed a trail. And so now you have to go out and look. I mean, the thing about the information age is there's so much information, right? I mean,
Yes.
the internet is overflowing with wonderful things, and you gotta put your ear to the ground and really go after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, you're a hero, and it's awesome.
Oh,
It-
I'm really just a nice old lady.
well, you're more than that. Well, let's do this. Chris, are you there?
Yep.
Hi, Chris. Are we ready to break out?
Yeah, we can do the breakout rooms right now.
Can you put Barbara in with the low brass folks?
Sure thing.
Alrighty. Well, let's give it a good 10 minutes. Like, I don't know, 4:50 or so, and then we'll regather. Okay, so everybody got the play? You're gonna come up with something to ask Barbara about potentially, and also just to talk about your team mix, right, Chris? Am I on this?
Sure.
Yeah, great. All right, have fun.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yeah, we'll see you in a minute, a few minutes. Just kind of takes time for them to all kind of get siphoned in, right?
They have to click join.
Yeah. So these are the people that have it on and they're in the bathroom or something. I get it. No problem.
Do you want any of us to go into any of the rooms?
There's Corey. I don't know. Corey's a low brass guy. He should probably go in the room.
Okay,
I
I
I'll,
can go in there. That'd be nice to kind of see what the conversation's like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I asked because I have to assign it. So let me figure out how to do that. That's an issue.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay, I see. Corey, I'm assigning you to the low brass. You cool with
Okay.
that?
Bye.
Dan, are you there?
Yeah.
You want to go to a room?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Oh man, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I love how it's just very, she tells it as it is, and
Yeah. It's off the cuff.
yeah, definitely. And she's so excited to talk, which is awesome. Like you can tell, this is good for her too, to kind of express and just share. So
She's a live wire, isn't she?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I told you guys when I talked to her on the phone, I just thought she was really lit, and I thought this would be great. This will be great. And health issues, and her husband just had big heart surgery, and just as feisty as it gets. I think that's awesome.
yeah. Well, that will be great. Even with I was thinking with the recording that we'll get, we get the audio transcript, so we can even copy some of the gems that she was saying. I thought some of those were amazing, like the cloudiness and just get out of your way and everything. So that was great.
Yeah, like I said, eminently quotable. Amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really, really like her. This has turned out great. I didn't know what was going to happen. I did like her on the phone, but she's just great. So Chris, So I did the whole thing today, and they
Wait,
still,
hold on, Professor. I'm going to pause the recording. Maybe that's.
yeah, that's a good idea. Well, that's cool. Look, they're coming back. The oboes are back. The flutes are back. Hi, Bridget. Hi, Rachel. Thumbs up. That's funny. There's Lucas. And Brandon. Brandon's a cheerleader now. Is that true? Am I right about that?
This stays in the group, but I'm actually the mascot. It's
Is this
anonymous.
true? You're the dog?
Yeah, I'm gonna be the dog.
Wow. Wow. We have the top dog in our group. We're the luckiest. How cool is that? So don't tell people, because we don't want Brandon being.
They said the first thing I have to learn is how to walk like Harry, and they have to teach me how to walk like it.
You know, there's some pretty famous bad things that have happened with the mascot over the years. I remember 20 years ago, probably, the husky and the Stanford tree got in a fight, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal. Like the cops like broke them up. And the Stanford tree guy wound up suing the husky guy, and the university went to bat for the husky guy, and it was all settled out of court or
Oh my
something.
God.
Yeah, it happened at Stanford. That's a long time ago. Brad would know. Brad McDavid would know.
Jeez.
It was on the front page of the Daily. There she is. So what'd you learn, Barbara?
We just mostly talked. They asked me questions.
Good.
But actually, it was mostly Patrick
Yeah,
asking me questions. But the
Good.
other guys are, I don't know. I think they were just so in awe that they couldn't
that's it.
speak.
That's
Really,
totally it.
yeah. Well, I told them that if I'd been in the same room with them, they would have been talking, because I would have made them talk. But no,
Right.
it was good actually. And the guy who's conducting, what's his name?
Corey.
Corey, yeah.
Yeah.
Corey had a really good question about the structure of that third movement, and I thought it was really interesting because I'd never been asked that question before, but I did when I thought about it, I did know the answer. Like I did realize that I had an intention in that respect, but sometimes you don't know that you know what you're doing until somebody asks you, because it's just all part of a process, you know. So
Right.
I thought that was a really interesting question, because nobody had ever asked me that before. He
Well,
wanted to know the difference between what the solo tuba was doing and what the ensemble was doing when they wind up like trading off, and the ensemble will play the same stuff, but and it was a good question. It was a really good question.
Good.
But
So-
I'm not going to tell you, because you'll have to take me out for a drink sometime to find out.
We will do that. We are definitely doing that. So, okay, you guys, if you have questions, if you want to send them in the chat. And Chris, are you going to field them then, or how are we doing this?
I'll field them today.
Oh, great, Corey. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead and send them privately to me, guys. We have a first question. This is an individual question. She asks, I'm wondering if you can recommend, or if you would recommend taking a music theory class if you just enjoy playing music, but are not planning to make music a career.
Yes, I definitely would, because I think it makes the language more clear to you. It's like, if I just want to read books, do I need to take a class that deals with, grammar? Yeah, it would be helpful. It's definitely helpful, because music is a language, and it has a lot of traditions and history within the language, and it is helpful to understand what a composer is doing when he or she uses that language. If they're deliberately choosing to it's like deliberately choosing this word over that word when there are subtle differences. So the more you know about the subtle differences in the words, it's the same thing. It just gives you an opportunity to to have a more in-depth understanding. You know,
Mm.
I don't think you need to write counterpoint probably or fugues or whatever, but
Right.
definitely, you know, definitely taking some theory is a great idea. It's a little dry sometimes. Find yourself a teacher who can make it fun.
Sure. Yeah.
I
Thank you.
know, if that's even faintly possible, right? But, you know, it is, it's very helpful, you know, and I mean, even though I was not a composition major, we did a lot of, and you know, analysis and structure and music history and stuff at McGill. I went to McGill in Montreal, and I think that really made a difference to me when I was structuring my own pieces. It made a huge difference that I had some background in that. But I think even if you just want to play, it's interesting to know why somebody did something in a certain place. Or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Brian, if you want to ask the clarinets question.
Yeah, sure. Hello. So we were wondering, after the contrabass or the contrabassoon example that you gave us,
Yeah.
we were wondering what the process was like to take an instrument that doesn't really have many existing musical examples and write something for it that is not only idiomatic and satisfying, but kind of adds to that sort of repertoire and creates a new tradition.
There were a lot of things that went together for me on that. One of the things was how low it is. So, you know, like I was saying before about the tuba, you don't want to get yourself muddy by staying down there too long or putting the piano too low as well. But that was one of those situations in which I used other things that were going on with me at the time. I had just listened. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, especially at night because I have trouble sleeping. So I listened to audiobooks, and I had just listened to an audiobook that I found very affecting. And the person who commissioned the piece had been abused by a neighbor when she was a child. So those things kind of came together. And I turned this this piece into a bit of a combination of the two things. The first movement really had this kind of menacing thing to it, which I felt like the contra worked really well for. It allowed that personality, that menacing personality to come out, where it looks like a nice jovial, you know, uncle-y type person, but really isn't at all. And I thought that the contra worked well for that, you know. So that's where I kind of jumped off from in that respect. Other than that, I just listened to, you know, I listened to her play it. It's not that different from bassoon, but you just, like I said, you don't want to allow it to get pedantic and muddy. You know, everything can go blah, blah, blah down there. And you never want to do that with those low instruments. You want to give them an opportunity to rise and fall a bit so that there's some humor or some joy or some emotionality. Is that a word? In it. You want to give them a line. You know, you need to give them a line so that they have a place to rise to. That's, at least for me, that's part of, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And again, I'm struck by the fact that you do look for inspiration and you take time for that, the whole arc of the story to sort of set up in your mind, it seems like,
Yeah.
before you go to paper. And again, I just want to say to the students one more time, that takes the pressure off. If you develop your imagination, you sort of take off the pressure for performance in this sense, and, you know, writing down the
It's not about you, right?
No, it's not
it's about transmitting your idea or whatever. Yeah.
Right. If
Yeah.
you sit and stare at the paper and you're going, man, what I just wrote isn't Mozart, you're never going to get anywhere.
Oh God, no,
That's for sure.
no. Yeah, exactly. It's true. That's so true. Yeah. Or I'm not good enough.
Right, totally.
Right.
Corey, do we have any more?
Oh yeah. Let's see. David Wall, do you want to ask yours?
David Wall, the contrabassoon player.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah, I want to know how I can get my hands on that contrabassoon sonata.
oh, all my music is published by Cimarron.
Great. Cool.
Yeah, so yeah, just go to the Cimarron website and yeah, Brian will help you out. Yeah. So what did you think about what I was saying about the contrabassoon? Because you play it, right?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's hard to, we play so often in the lower register that it is a difficult range for it to be kind of a soloistic instrument because it is very flubby. It can
Right,
be.
and it's really handy in a band
Right.
to be able to bring that lower octave in
Mhm.
to give it fullness, but
Mhm.
that's not where you want a solo.
Right, yeah, but the contrabassoon's also limited on range. It doesn't have the same kind of range that a bassoon does, so you're extra limited in what you can do.
Yeah, yeah. But it's so easy to just, I don't know. It's so easy to be very kind of two-dimensional and just let it be kind of buffo and not have any depth to the emotion or the characterization of what you're doing. I really try not to do that to people.
Yeah.
It's like the poor tuba players that had to go bop, 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 it's just so boring. It doesn't give you anything to do. Why would anybody want to be a professional contrabassoon player
Right.
if there's nothing to feel,
Yeah.
or to say? I feel sorry for people who who went all those years without anything to play.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. It does lend itself to being kind of a broody kind of instrument, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And it's a cool idea to explore.
Great.
Well, there you go, everybody. A little bit of free press. If you're interested in our music, it's on Cimarron's website. You can go check it out there. We'll go to Gabriel with the trumpet question.
Hey, how's it going, Barbara? So we were talking about we've talked about Corleano and then Alex Shapiro recently and their use of tone maps and like a visual representation of our music. It sounds like you have a very good grasp on the narrative that you're trying to portray. But
Yeah.
do you use any visual representations before you start composing?
Occasionally, but mostly not. But occasionally, I'll make a little chart out for myself about where the narrative's going to go. But I do see pictures in my head, or I see a story, or I just have a point of view. But I don't make tonal maps in that sense. I think it's partly because I spent a decade working in the theater. That I got a sense of, and I loved, I did ballet when I was a child, and my family went to the ballet and we liked ballet. And so there's always an element of somewhat balletic or danciness that comes out occasionally in my music, not in every piece, but it'll come in there. But my music is all about people. So it's not intellectual in that sense. So I don't make structural maps of the technical stuff so much as I make structural maps of the human stuff in it. Somebody, there was a euphonium player at UMKC who did a doctoral presentation on my euphonium music, and he called it "The Music of Barbara York, a Touch of Humanity." And it's like he got it, right? Because for me, it's all about the ways in which human beings are similar, that we're so much the same. And we all have many of the same concerns and many of the same feelings, no matter where we are, where we come from, or whatever. and it's touching those things that I might make a little map or chart of, but mostly it's there in my head where I want to go. And I definitely want to go somewhere else at the end of a piece than I was when I started it out. It needs to be a journey for me. I need to take the audience on a journey into either thinking about something differently than they did before, or sometimes it's cathartic emotionally, where they get to actually feel and let out their feeling that they perhaps had repressed, or people sometimes cry.
Awesome. Well, not awesome that they cry, but like I like that thought process and what you're saying. Thank you.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the way other people do it. I just do what I just do what I do, you know, and what I can do.
That's all you can do.
I can't be somebody else.
Exactly.
You know? And when I stopped trying to be somebody else, that's when I started being more successful or more pleased with what I thought I was doing. I was like, I liked my own stuff a lot better when I didn't worry about imitating anybody anymore.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have our last question, it looks like. Bridget, if you want to ask yours from the flutes and oboes.
Oh, flutes and oboes.
Yeah.
Before you start, I just want to apologize to the oboes for talking about how they were uptight because of the back pressure. So it's okay. I was just kidding. Really, seriously.
So we really liked hearing what you said about prioritizing and striving for honesty and expression in your work. And we were thinking about process and wondering how do you know when you get to the point where you feel like a piece you're composing is really expressing what you're trying to express? Like, kind of is there a way that you kind of know when you've gotten to that point?
Depends on what the piece is, but yeah, if I can listen to the score playback. My husband hates those score playbacks because he thinks that everything sounds like a harmonica, and my stuff isn't even MIDI. It's like samples. You know, it's not bad. It really isn't. But I hear in my head the real instruments. But if I can listen to the score playback and have myself go through the emotion that I want the player or the audience to feel. For instance, when I wrote How Beautiful and I listened to the score playback several times, it made me cry. And then I knew it was successful, because if it wasn't making me cry, then I hadn't done my job. Kind of, I don't know, it's hard to explain. If I can't feel myself listening back to it, because you don't feel that stuff when you're writing. It's a much more technical process when you're writing, but if you listen back and it touches you, then for me, then I know I'm pretty close to what I want it to be. I don't think there's any such thing as perfection, or we don't get to it, but hopefully you get better as you keep going, and some pieces are more successful than others. But the people that are the most honest with me when they're asking me for a piece, they usually get the most interesting pieces. Interestingly enough, the people who kind of hold back and don't make a connection with me, their pieces are a little less moving or interesting or perhaps honest. Maybe I'm parasitic, but I use the connection with other people to draw on, to feed back to them, their own emotions, and it's kind of instinctive. I guess I'm an empath in that sense, So I use that energy to write better pieces, I think. Does that answer that at all? Or did I just go off?
No, I think, yeah, that definitely was along the lines of our question.
Okay.
And, yeah, we were thinking about our own class project when we came up with that question. I think that.
Great.
I hope that helps everybody.
Are you having fun with that project? Is it fun? Yeah, I know. Maybe.
Yeah, I think
I
it's
would
really
personally,
new.
I would find it difficult to write with other people. So there you go. I know lots of people like to write with a partner or whatever. Personally, I do so much stuff in my head, and I don't I don't talk about it until it's out on the paper. So personally, I would probably find that part of it hard, to have to cooperate in that sense. But you know,
Yeah, through the
you can make games out of it, though. I used to teach. I used to teach elementary school kids a little bit about doing soundscapes and things like that, and just with any sounds that they could make with their body or their mouth or whatever. But I used to ask them questions that would make a connection between the right brain and the left brain, like, make me a sound for orange, or make me a sound for vanilla, or a sound for chocolate. How about a sound for purple? You know, so that they would have to connect parts of the brain that they didn't normally connect, right? And that opened up their creativity. That it freed them so that they didn't have to be imitative. And I told them they weren't allowed to do sound effects. No sound effects, you know? They just had to describe what it looked like, or what it felt like, or what it tasted like, or what it smelled like, right? But they couldn't use the sound to describe what it sounded like. They had to use the sound for something different. So you can, you know, in doing your stuff, see if you can make a game out of it if it gets really bogged down. You know, it's sometimes you have to be a little playful, especially if you get bogged down, I think. Yeah, go ahead and be playful, maybe.
Well, Barbara, you're wonderful. This is
Well,
been
thank
such
you.
a
This has
fantastic.
been a lot of fun, really, so much fun.
Yeah,
I really enjoy meeting students and talking to students. It's so great.
yeah. These guys are the best too, I have to say.
Yeah, they're
Anyway, well, we will meet again.
I
And
hope so, yeah.
I'll buy you a drink and it'll be wonderful. But everybody, let's turn our sound things on and give Barbara York our applause. Here we go.
Oh, thank you.
Yay.